My name is Wannisa Matcha, as you know, and these are our collaborators for this project, which is we have Dragan, Jelena, Nora Ayu, Chris, Andrew, and Dinejila. So in this study is our continuous work on analytic of the learning strategy. For this paper, we are focusing on study the association with the personality trait. Sorry. Okay. As we know, self-regulated learning is important, especially when students are learning in MOOCs, which require they do a lot of self-regulation. And one of the important steps for the self-regulation is using the enactment of the learning strategy. So students are still need guidance and feedback on how to select the appropriate learning tactic and strategy. For the instructor to be able to provide the feedback on this selection of the learning tactic and strategy, they need to understand what type of the learning tactic and strategy students are using. The previous research analyzing detect the learning tactic and strategy by using the self-report. However, the current literature highlight that using the self-report might be biased and students are not quite accurate in reporting how they learn. So the current research suggests us to also have a look into the trace data which record the actual learning interaction of the student. Therefore, we need to find the appropriate method in order to detect the learning tactic and strategy student using from the trace data. Before we move on, these are the two terms that we are going to use throughout this presentation, which is the first term is the learning tactics. In our study, we differentiate between learning tactic and strategy. Learning tactic is identified as a sequence of learning actions performed by the student to complete the given task, and learning strategy is seen as the how students are regulated, how students use the patterns of how students using the learning tactics. There are currently increasing in research of detecting the learning tactic and strategy from the trace data. However, most of there are still the association of the detected learning tactic and strategy from the trace data itself are not exploring in terms of how it associates with the psychological construct such as the personality trait. Why personality trait is important? Because personality trait is one example of the individual differences, which have proven to be associated with the academic performance and how students will engage into the learning process. The research in psychology identify personality into 5 traits, which are the openness. Openness is referred to the proactive behavior towards seeking and exploring the new experience. Those who score high in openness tends to be friendly, and lower score tends to have a conventional thinking method. Conscientiousness is referred to the trait of being persistent, responsible, self-organized. So high score in conscientiousness show ability to maintain the goal-direct behavior and self-discipline. Extraversion reflects the sociable behavior. High score in extraversion tends to be friendly and talkative and more outgoing as compared to the lower score. Agreeableness is characterized as being generous and kind and helpful. Emotional instability, also referred to neuroticism, there are those who score high in the emotional instability tends to be anxiety, and lower score tend to be more calm and in control of their emotion. So as we mentioned, there are still lack of the study exploring the relationship between the data-driven learning tactic and strategy with the personality trait. To achieve this goal, therefore, the first step is to be able to detect the theoretical, meaningful learning tactic and strategy. And we also explore if there is any association between the detected learning strategy and the academic performance. Secondly, we are exploring, is there any association between the learning strategy adopted by the learner in a MOOC and any of the personality traits? In this study, we are using the data collected from the MOOCs. The course name is Let's Get Active, offering by the University of Edinburgh. The course aims to raise awareness of the physical activity for the health and providing the guidance to increase the level of daily physical activity. So learner will offer with the video lecture, optional reading material, quizzes, discussion, assignments. In order to complete the course, to pass the course, learner need to complete at least 2 assignments and 3 quizzes. And they also will receive the promotional message to help them maintain the physical activity for the 6 months after enroll to the course. The dataset included in this study are those who answer to personality traits survey, as well as complete at least one of the graded items. So at the end, we collected it. Most of our participants are female, 78% are female, and yeah, and 53% managed to pass the course. So the method we use in order to detect the learning tactic and strategy, it comprised of 2 main steps, which is the tactic detection. The tactic was detected by using initially we divide the learning into a small sessions, 30 minutes apart for each sessions. And then based on the learning action of the student, we use the first order Markov model to formulate the process and compute the transition between learning actions, and using the expectation maximization to detect the patterns of the learning actions. Learning strategy is referred to how students regulate the tactic, how students employ the tactics. So for each student, how they are using each learning tactic and the total number of tactics we use, and we use hierarchical clustering to detect the patterns of how students employ these tactics. The association with personality traits was studied by using self-report. In this study, we're using the 10-item personality inventory and using the multinomial logistic regression to explore the association of the learning strategy and learning personality trait. As a result, we detect 4 learning tactics, including long diverse. Long diverse consists of 49% of all learning sessions included in this study. The characteristic of long diverse is that the sequence, each learning sequence are quite long, consists of more than 60 learning actions in mean. They consist of variety of learning actions. Video-oriented consists of 12% of the learning sessions included in this study. The main learning action for this category is they are focusing on the video. The information-oriented tactics consists of 19% of all learning session, is a short sequence, less than in average, there are 6 learning action in each sessions, and they are focusing on the supplementary learning material, which is reading material and information pages. The last tactic we detect is assessment oriented. 20% of the learning session are categorized as the assessment oriented. Students are focusing on the after video quizzes and the graded item. So based on these learning tactics, we use the hierarchical to detect the patterns of how students employ the learning tactic and identify 4 types of learning strategy groups. The first group is disengaged group. Students in this group interact with the first topic by apply the learning tactics. The most dominant tactic they use is long diverse, and secondly, they are focusing on the assessment oriented tactics. But then the level of engagement drop after the second topic. The second group is surface learner. They are focusing on employing the assessment-oriented tactic as well as long diverse tactic. But again, the level of engagement gradually drop, and the level of engagement of this group is higher than the disengaged group, the first group. The third group, the level of engagement is increasing, and students in this group rather focusing on using the long diverse when interacting with topic 1 and 2, but when they are interacting with topic 3, they also employ the information-oriented tactics. Similarly, in the fourth group, highly active group, the level of engagement is increasing as compared to the first 3 strategy groups. Students highly focusing on using the long diverse oriented tactic, but they also using the information oriented as well as the video oriented tactic. But when interacting with topic 3, they are highly use the information oriented tactics. In terms of the performance, the disengaged strategic group show the lowest performance, and highly active group show the highest performance. When we use there are significant difference in terms of the performance for each strategy group, and we compare using the pairwise comparison, and we detect the significant difference across all the groups, and the effect size will range from small to large. In terms of the personality trait, we are using the self-report to collect the data regarding the personality of individuals. Students are reporting of having neutral in terms of the openness, but they report quite high score, over 7. The score is over 7. They report quite high score in terms of conscientiousness, extraversion, agreeableness, and emotional instability. When you use the multinomial logistic regression, we found that the multinomial logistic regression was used to compute the likelihood of the student will adapt certain learning strategy as compared to the alternative learning strategy. So the significant relationships show that a unit increase in agreeableness score, student will have a unit increase in agreeableness score is associated with the higher odds of adopting the highly active learning strategy as compared to the active strategy groups. And they also have higher odds of adopting the surface strategy over disengaged and active strategy. In terms of the increasing in 1 unit of the conscientiousness score, show positive association with the higher odds of adopting the highly active strategy over disengaged and surface strategy. Emotional instability were negatively associated with the likelihood of using highly active strategy over disengaged, surface, and active strategy group. Extraversion, the significant association showed that the increase in extraversion score by 1 unit was associated with the higher odds of using the surface and over the active strategy. However, we find no significant association observed in terms of the openness score. As a result, we detect the learning strategy, 4 types of learning strategy which represent the approaches to learning proposed by BIG. The approaches to learning identify that deep learning strategy and surface learning strategy, and they also identify the active learning strategy. Deep learning approach is the person who employ the deep learning approach aim to deeply understand the learning contents. So they apply many learning tactics to achieve the learning goal. Then they know that in order to fully understand the contents, they need to put some efforts and engage into the learning material. Therefore, the deep learning is found to be associated with the high academic performance. The learning strategy detect based on the trace data that represent of the deep learning approach are highly active and active strategy group. The surface learner, they employ shallow learning engagement just to pass the requirement of the course. So the previous research by using self-report found that the surface learning approach is associated with the low academic performance. In our study, surface and disengaged strategy group are very representative of using surface learning. In terms of the association of the learning strategy and personality trait, in our study, we found that conscientiousness, which is characterized as being dependable, persistent to maintain the behavior to achieve the goal, are predictive of using highly active strategy group. Well, when we look back into the literature by using the self-report to collect the data regarding the learning strategy and approaches to learning, we found that the conscientiousness is predictive of using the deep learning approach, which is represented by our highly active strategy group in this study, because students are directed by the motive to deeply understand the learning content, so they are engaged in the learning and employ the necessary learning strategy. Agreeableness is characterized as being kind and generous. So in our study, we found that the agreeableness is associated with adapting the highly active and surface strategy, which is represented by the deep strategy and surface strategy in the literature. So actually in the literature we found that agreeableness is both predictive of using the deep and surface learning strategy. So future research might be needed in order to fully understand this personality trait and its association with the adoption of learning strategy. The emotional instability, which is characterized by being anxiety, are less likely to adopt the highly active strategy group. The emotional instability is driven by the fear to fail motive. So student tends to focus mainly on the assessment related activity, as represented by the use of surface learner who just jump into the assessment activities just to pass the course. So they're less likely to adopt the deep learning approach, similar to our finding here. In terms of extraversion, which characterized by being sociable and talkative person, in our study we found that the extraversion were more predictive of using the surface strategy. And we found a significant association for the openness score. As a summary, in this study, we used the learning analytic-based method to detect the learning tactic and strategy. The learning tactic were represents of the activities that students use in when interacting with the course contents. The learning strategy is representative of the approach that students are using, the regularity of the tactics. And in our study, we found that these strategies are predictive of use, the personality trait is predictive of the strategy that student has potential to use. Therefore, as an implication for this study, personality trait might be able to use to inform the instructor at the earlier stage, which means that instructor might use the personality trait to collect the data regarding the potential strategy that student might use. Therefore, they can intervene or provide some suggestion, recommendation, or personalized feedback for the student at the beginning of the course. But be cautioned, because this personality trait cannot be treated throughout the whole course or to assess the student, but rather to be used at the beginning of the course when the trace data is not available. But when the trace data come, the trace data has found to be better correlate with the actual learning behavior of the students. So we suggest that to use the trace data to analyze the pattern of how students learn. And some limitation of our study, majority of those who answer to this survey are female. Therefore, our study might be biased to gender, and we used only 10-item personality inventory to increase the level of participants in this study. So it might not be able to capture some subscale of the personality test as accurate as the longer survey or longer questionnaire. And we are using the unsupervised machine learning to detect the learning tactic and strategy. Therefore, we need to interpret our finding according to the theory. With that, I open the floor for Q&A. Thank you.